Hey everybody, Norm from Tested here.
And Sean from Tested.
And welcome back to our workshop where today we'll be talking about this laser cutter in front of us.
Yeah, we've been testing out a lot of Dremel stuff lately. This is the latest release in their Digilab series. It's their first laser cutter. And it's a 40 watt CO2 laser, so it uses a glass tube laser. And it's class 4. So this guy would be classified more in like the hobby laser.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can do a lot with it, but compared to like the bigger industrial lasers, you know, it's a little bit different beast.
Yeah.
We've been seeing more of these come on the market lately, so they're jumping in the ring.
Absolutely. You've seen things like the Glowforge. You may have even seen a hobby laser from Full Spectrum, which is the company.
May look a little familiar there.
that Dremel partnered with, but of course with the Dremel brand and their customer support and a few things that they've put in to make it theirs.
Yeah, with them delving into 3D printing and laser cutting, which is a little out of the box for them, they were pretty smart about it. They went to like somebody that knew this stuff and they took that, licensed it from them, and then did their improvements on it and made, you know, added more safety features, more documentations, you know, put their spin on it. And generally, I feel like the additions that they've done have been good. But this is basically based off the Full Spectrum laser Muse.
Yes.
Yeah.
So something in the 40 watt range, class 4 laser range. What are things that you can do with it? Like I have a Glowforge, and I imagine that very similar things.
So it can cut and engrave pretty standard stuff even the bigger ones can do. It has a 20 by 12 cutting area. You can cut up to about a 1/4 inch thick, like wood, plastic, leather, fabric, you know, felt, rubber, all that, as long as it falls within the safety guidelines of stuff you can laser. So like just like any laser, you can't do like PVC stuff.
Yeah.
Anything with PVC type stuff will put off chlorine gas, which
Vinyl,
is bad.
same thing.
So yeah, vinyl, PVC, you know, use your vinyl cutter instead.
Yep.
So it's the pretty standard array of stuff, and then it can go up to about a 1/4 inch thick. That's what it has room for and power for.
And focus.
Yeah, and then you can engrave. So you can engrave like, you know, glass, slate, anodized aluminum, like metals that have coatings that you can burn off, some types of mirrors and stuff like that. So you can do a wide variety of things. If you're engraving, you can go up to about 1¼ inch height because you can take out the cutting bed then.
Right.
It's basically all self-contained here. It has a 7-inch touchscreen, which we'll take a closer look at, which is nice because not all of these on this level have the interface on the machine. It's a lot of times computer dependent. So I really like that feature. It can connect via Wi-Fi or Ethernet. And the really nice thing is it does not have to have internet connection.
Yeah.
It's just using that as a connection. You can direct connect via Ethernet by typing in the IP.
The glass-based tube lasers require a little bit of cooling, and liquid cooling is what this and something like the Glowforge has. The Glowforge has a self-contained cooling system, nothing outside the chassis. This, along with the Full Spectrum Muse, the cooling is an external unit.
It's called the Hex box.
Yeah.
So it takes about like a water bottle worth of water that you put in the tank. You can change it out if it gets, you know, nasty or moldy or anything. And then it has water tubes that are return and an incoming that chill the water, run it around the tube to keep it cool for long-term running. This also has an air assist, so this also has an air compressor in it. And that is basically just a little air tube that comes off the laser head, and that helps with like keeping smoke out of the way so you retain good focus with the laser beam, and it also helps keep flare-ups and burning down, so that's all good things. So and so this doesn't take up too much room. You can set this off to the side. We just have it setting here so everybody can see it.
Yep.
It also has red dot positioning, so it has just a, you know, laser pointer type laser, so you can see where the actual laser is going to point on your material, which is helpful. But it also added, they also have a camera on the head as well.
You mentioned air as well, in addition to the setup requiring, of course, the water cooling apparatus. You need ventilation. All laser cutters need ventilation. And so there is a big exhaust port at the end here, which you can affix to your own exhaust system, or they sell one.
Yeah, well, they have a few different options. There's an onboard exhaust fan. So if you're just doing like light use, so they have this whole chart of like, if you're doing it this way, if you're doing it that way, you know, in this size room, And so with the onboard one, they're like, don't do more than 2 hours a day in a 450 square foot room. As a point of reference, our tested workshop is almost 200 square feet. So technically, We're not supposed to be using it in here. So keep that in mind when you're going through the requirements for this. You know, a garage might be a better setup. But they also have a booster fan that you can get, which is mainly for if you're having longer than 10 feet runs of the hose.
Yep.
And then they also have the BOFA filter, which is what they sent us to try. We've used BOFA filters before. They're great. They have very large HEPA and carbon filters in them that filter out everything within the room for the most part.
It's an optional accessory, and the nice thing about this BOFA filter is that it's actually compact relatively.
Yeah, it's like a mini fridge size.
Yeah, and not too loud.
Yeah, this was all things together. It was surprisingly quiet compared to some of the other laser cutters we've used, so that was nice. And another interesting thing about this is it is the first laser that is UL certified. So Underwriters Laboratory, they are an independent place that does safety standards. So like you always get the lights or other electrical plants with UL approved. So they have met a certain a standard of safety, you know. And up until this point, UL did not have laser standards. So apparently Dremel contacted them and worked with them to establish like home use laser settings and guidelines for that. So is that a conflict of interest? I don't know, but like regardless, they are advertising it as the first UL certified. And it has an array of safety sensors in it for like, you know, simple stuff like the lid's open, so it cuts off the laser. Exhaust fan isn't working, which is a nice touch. If it has, you know, if things are on fire, if you know, stuff like that. Air quality sensors. So it has a good array of safety sensors on it, which makes it really good for like the education environment, which they gear a lot of this stuff towards.
Yeah. So really, using a laser boils down to your common sense and you following the operating procedure that's recommended, so you are in the room when these are operating and putting the right materials in.
The two biggest guidelines to go with laser cutters is vent it properly and never leave it alone. Like you'll be amazed at how quickly things can catch on fire.
Right, exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about the setup. It comes in a gigantic box. It was really well packed. And it weighs about 70 pounds. So you may need some help getting this up on the table and unpacked and stuff like that. Our friend Jen Schachter, I know she reviewed one of these for Make Magazine, and they had some problem out of the box where things were out of alignment. So this has a whole series of mirrors and laser and everything. Everything has to be precise, and theirs was completely out of whack, which I don't hold that against Dremel. Like we've seen what package handlers can do sometimes, especially with something this big and heavy. Ours was perfect right out of the box. In the manual, there's a really great walkthrough about checking the alignment and even adjusting the alignment. And it even comes with this little thermal paper. So this is kind of like thermal printing, labels and stuff like that. You put this on the lens and you do some test fires, and ours came out perfect.
Sweet.
So that was great right out of the box, and all of our cuts were good.
Great.
So it has an on-screen setup guide, which takes you through everything, which I love. That just made things so much easier. It just like, do this, do this, do this. You have to fill up the hex box with some water. You have to connect the water and air hoses. You connect your exhaust, all pretty straightforward and walk through on the intro. There's also tutorials on board, which walk you through some of the things you can do on there as well, which is nice. So operating this thing, so it worked great. It was really easy to use. I liked how it worked, and basically, it's not cloud-based software, which I was really concerned about because I hate that. So the way this works is interesting. The software is actually on the machine itself. So when you do connect to it with a web browser, with an IP address, and it can either work over Wi-Fi, over your internet, your network connection, or via an Ethernet. And I had trouble getting it directly connected with the Ethernet to use it without the internet or the network. But you can totally do that. I just think it was our router setting that I don't know enough about to fix.
But local area network, and what that means is that because the processing is all done locally, it doesn't matter the speed of your laptop or your computer. You can have multiple computers connected to this, and they can all just see the interface.
Yes.
And it will run the same.
Yeah, which was interesting because we did discover you could have the browser window open on multiple computers and it would trace the progress of the cut that was going on, or you could pause or stop it from either computer. So that was nice.
Yeah.
So now we got this connected through the web browser. It's their software. They did change the software from the full spectrum as far as I can see. And it's pretty good, not great. But I talked to them a little bit, and some of my complaints they're actively working on, so that was good to hear. So basically, you can load EPS or SVGA vector files in. Those are going to be cut files or what they call scoring files. So you're like doing really fine etching. You can also load JPEGs or PNGs as raster files. So that's going to be when you're going to do like that dot matrix style, like grayscale, you know, or coloring in things. And you can also do PDF, which will handle both vector or raster.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
PDF of both of those, and you actually had a lot of success using PDFs for alignment purposes.
Yeah, because it's a little interesting. So I ran into a few quirks with it, which we'll talk about. So when you bring in these things, it gives you the option of so let's say you bring in a PDF and it has both vector, so cutting or scoring, and raster, so coloring things in, so to speak. It'll ask you if you want to bring in the cutting pass or the engraving pass or both, which was kind of cool because you could use the same file then to bring them in separately and have them separate on the...
Right, as layers.
Yeah, so that was kind of a nice feature. That was with the primarily with the PDF that would happen with. You can then reposition things, scale them, and rotate them, all with exact positioning. You can actually type in the numbers, which was a nice touch.
Scale the specific sizes, specific ratios for growing and shrinking things.
And that all worked fine. There was a few quirks with the undo function in the software where the undo was inconsistent. So like let's say we resized something, then we moved it. Well, occasionally I'd hit undo and it would skip the undoing the move and just undo the scale, but it would still be left where we moved it.
Yeah,
so little quirk there.
I mean, let's say you're designing something using a vector design file program, and you want to export an SVG that has, you can color code, right? You can color code your for your score and your cut. Will this let you import and within one file say that is a cut line, that is a score line, or you have to import separate files?
Kind of. That's a very good question, Lauren. So the way it works, we've used a lot of different laser cutters, and what drives me nuts is they all work totally differently. So like some use color-coded lines to indicate what function's going to happen. Some use a system of layers which indicate what is going to happen.
Some require thickness in the stroke.
So they're all over the place every place does it different. So this is strictly regulated by if it's a vector, it is a cut or a etch, or a score, what they call score. If it is a raster, then it is going to be an engrave. Yeah. So you can't really pick and choose between those. But what you can do is if you color code your file, it will recognize up to 21 different colors. And then within that, it'll come up with like the control panel to tweak your settings. And you can tell if each color is a cut or a score. And you can adjust the power settings for each of those. So that was actually really helpful. Yeah. We did run into a little bit of problem where I had some quirks where bringing in a PDF with vector files, for some reason, if I just said bring in everything, because it's supposedly only cut or score files, it had a double image. It had like the color-coded ones that I had, and then underneath it was a solid black layer, and I'd have to move the one out of the way and delete the other one. Now, if I brought them in specifically like cut only or raster only or anything like that, it came in fine. So I don't know if that's a quirk in the software or a quirk coming out of Illustrator.
It's also interesting that if you import a vector and they were color-coded, yes, you can adjust the power settings, but you can't move them independently. They don't split them up as different manipulable objects.
Right. So if all the vectors came in together, they're still like, they move as one unit. So if you, for some reason, you need to move those around a little bit, you'd have to bring in separate vectors as separate files.
Right. And then realign them.
Yeah. So the other advantage of the PDF is it gave you real-time positioning. Like wherever you had it on your layout, it would put it in that place. If you export as SVGA or EPS, it basically just puts a box around the art only, and then it just automatically sticks it up in the corner. So if you're bringing in multiple files that have to be perfectly aligned, you want to go with PDF.
Yeah. Which means that when you're working on a 20 by 12 bed, a little bit smaller for the cut area, you want to create a template on your editing program so you know where exactly there's going to be and then save that as PDF.
That's exactly how I would do it as well. Yeah. Now, I ran into a really interesting quirk with the SVG. So this is pure vector only. A 1-inch square that I created in Illustrator in inches, the document was in inches and the square was in inches. I exported it as an SVGA and it came in as 0.76 inches.
So scaling was wrong.
Yes, and I tried everything that I could think of to remedy this and I could not get it to come in right. I talked to Dremel about it and they were like, huh, and we haven't heard back quite an answer on what's going on with that, so I don't know if that's an Illustrator quirk that I'm doing wrong or if there's a quirk in the software. If I brought it in as PDF or JPEG or anything like that, it was all fine. So just see, I'd be interested to see what other people experience.
You basically have, like with all laser cutters, develop your own workflow to work with some of the limitations. There is no laser cutter system we've used that has everything and makes it easy for everything.
Overall, I would say this software worked really well. The last quirk I ran into is, let's say you had a vector file and a raster file and they're over top of each other. And let's say the vector file is a little bigger. There was no way for me to get to the raster file underneath. There's no like bring to front or there was no layers. So the only way I could select it was to either shrink the top layer or rotate it and so I could click on it. Which is annoying, but it was easy to put back, so I'd shrink it 50% and then type in 100 and it'd go back. But still, it's like that they are aware of that and that is something that they're actively working on.
UI is tough.
Yeah, it is. So, all right, so we got all this, we got our vectors in, we got our rasters in, so what do we do now? They have a nice little material database. So it's like your standard stuff, acrylic, wood, leather, and most of them have thicknesses associated. So like acrylic, typically is like 1/16, 1/8, 1/4. So they have all those, they have presets. Anytime I used the preset for that exact thing, it was perfect. Like I had no problems with it, came out great. There's a few puzzling things where like they had like birch plywood and then all the thicknesses, but then they also had walnut and no thickness. I'm like, okay. And so I tried doing like a 1/8 piece of walnut and it wouldn't burn through, like cut through the whole way. So I had to tweak the settings, but I'm like, why would there not be thickness associated with that as well? Little quirk. They have a pretty thorough list of presets that you can use for most materials. You can also tweak any of them. You can add your own. There are settings on this which I have not quite figured out, but they have a option to do test cuts. So if anybody has tried to figure out settings for your laser cutter for new materials, it is such a pain in the butt.
That is really nice.
I can't quite figure this out yet though, because I mean, this is pretty straightforward where you have, it tells you what heat it's using. It has the depth and it has the speed. So it has a little square for each type of setting. Now, I was under the impression that each one of these I would assume,
different heat level.
Right, but they're all the same. And there's 12 of them that fill up a sheet. So I can't quite figure that out. And it doesn't go into depth in the manual about that either. So I would like to get a little more explanation on that, but it's nice that they're making that effort to make a little more like standardized way of figuring out settings for new materials.
Yeah. Sounds like an incomplete feature.
I don't know. I got a little bit of information from them about it, but it wasn't quite clear. So as we said, you can tweak all of the settings. You can assign different colors to different powers and different like score or cut. So one of the things I was a little confused about is the controls that you have are heat, speed, and depth. Typically, what I would see on most laser cutters is power and speed. Right? So heat, I'm assuming power, but depth, I'm like how heat and depth is telling me they have to be interconnected with power somehow. So the way
does speed. Like depth also it feels like speed is a factor of that too.
Yeah, so I chatted with Dremel a little bit about it, and they did confirm that both the heat and the depth are affecting the power, but they didn't really go into depth about exactly how. And so the basic explanation is you adjust depth until it is cutting the whole way through your material. So that makes sense. And then you adjust the heat to improve surface finish. So if like you adjust it to the point where it's cutting through your plastic, but it's kind of melty on the edges, then you back off the heat. And then you kind of play around a little bit until you get them. So once that clicked in my brain, I was like, well, that makes sense. That seems like you could do some nice tweaking with it.
Yeah. As with every laser cutter, you know, the presets they have, that material database, it's a starting point.
Yeah.
And these variables, you got to have a notebook, have a sheet of paper close by to write all your references.
Exactly. So once you have all that set, it comes with a little puck. So this is your laser height puck. So this is to get the laser in focus. Right. So basically you're going to load up your material in there, whatever you're using. So this is going to go on the print bed. You're going to put your your puck on that, and then the head is adjustable with a thumb screw, and you set the laser nozzle on there, and that will give the optimal focus to your material so that it cuts the cleanest.
Now this is really interesting because this is a fundamentally different approach than something like what the Glowforge uses. The Glowforge uses a series of cameras on the head and auto calibrates the height for focus. You never have to use this. But then also the trade-off is that it takes a little bit of time.
This takes seconds.
And that's the thing with a lot of industrial lasers, the manual adjust for focus, once you get used to it, it really, like you said, is you just build it into your process. It's not foolproof because you have to do it, but it's faster.
Yeah, it's kind of like auto leveling on 3D printers. It's a great feature, but like if I do it right manually the first time, then I don't do it for weeks.
Yeah.
Versus the ones that try to do it every single print, and it kind of slows you down. So this literally takes seconds. I have no problem with this at all, and it works perfectly fine.
I presume they will sell you a replacement if you lose that little puck.
$50. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. They come with two. So there's a backup, and also the thermal paper comes with it. So you have your focus set for the laser, and you send it from the software, and it's going to boot up on the screen here. And so the nice thing about it is it comes, part of the safety features, it has a whole checklist. It's like, is the lid closed? Is the exhaust fan on? You know, it checks all of these, and then there's 3 checks that you always have to go through. Is the material laserable? So if you pick something safe, have you adjusted the laser focus? So it's just a reminder. And do you promise to stay by it the whole time? So you have to hit check, 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 and then start.
It's half liability waiver for them, and also half sanity check for you.
I did forget this sometimes, so I was like, oh, thank you. That was actually a good reminder.
Yeah.
And that takes just a second to go through that, and then it has a nice little readout on the countdown. The countdown's totally accurate. It has pause and stop on there. I will say I accidentally bumped, because they're big buttons. I actually stopped a print or a cut in the middle because I bumped it with the touch screen. So just be careful of that.
Yeah, but there is pause and resume, which is a really good feature, especially if you need to leave the room for any reason.
Yeah,
you would be able to use that.
Never do.
And you could also do that even remotely from the computer.
Yes, it has that on the computer as well. And then the other nice thing about it is it retains the projects in memory. So you can, with this completely unhooked and no computer, you can fire this up and start an old job from the touchscreen interface and just run it. And it even gives you a little preview of the platform and the job. So that's cool.
I mean, a lot of people we've talked to are interested in experimenting with laser cutters or using it for like one of two purposes. One, very boutique processes where you're designing something different, maybe just making one or two, experimenting with materials where you're not mass producing basically. The other use case, if someone's doing some light manufacturing and you're making repeatable things, having the design stored here and also in the software being able to say just lay out 16 objects.
Yes.
That's useful for people who want to do some light manufacturing.
Which that reminds me of a feature in the software that I really did like. It has an auto array. Which you can start with one item up in the corner and then it just has a grid and you just drag how many you want and
it's very nice.
That was really nice.
Yeah.
So let's actually take a look at some of the things. Why don't you grab the paint rack there? So people may remember my paint rack that I designed. So I cut this out on the Dremel. Any boogers or nastiness is from my poor glue job. It's not the laser. It did a fine job. It did a nice job on the scoring and on the cutting. It took about a little under 15 minutes to do the whole thing.
Yep.
Did a great job.
And something that's characteristic of using tube lasers is perfectly smooth on acrylic edges as opposed to the pulses of the metal lasers.
Yeah, so this turned out nice. Totally happy with that. We got a few other things over there. We have our our old friend, the Westworld memory card. So this is anodized aluminum. So you can't cut metal on this, but you can etch coatings off of them. So if it's painted or anodized, you can burn it off. So I just burned off the coating on this. This was on the low res setting because when you're doing raster, you can pick how fine the passes will be.
Okay.
So I did low res. This took about 3.5 minutes. Turned out great. I couldn't differentiate between this and some that I've done on the higher quality lasers. I also did, just for kicks, I did the high res version of this, which is 14 minutes. On this, with all these straight lines, is like there was no difference at all. Like you couldn't tell.
It's really if you're doing something like an image.
Yeah, like or really fine detail, like etching type stuff. But this is like just burning off wide pieces. Yeah. So that turned out really good. And then this, I wanted to try material that was not in the database. So this is my faux metal that is on acrylic blend that I use for the ghost trap. So this is a funky material and you can't use straight up acrylic settings. So I messed around with the settings a little bit. I didn't use the guide that we had, but I just kind of adjusted them on my own. Turned out great after about 3 tries. So no complaints on that whatsoever.
Also, really good tip. If you're mass manufacturing things, like what you did, make one and write the settings on the back of a dummy piece.
I've got so many things.
That is so smart. Love it.
Back. We did, some wood. So this is 1/8 ply. This is our globe, that we've done before. So it did a pretty nice. Now, I should back up and say I didn't mask this at all. I just burn it straight on the wood. And as we've talked about many times before, when you do that, you're gonna get a
little bit of scorching.
Yeah. So there's a little scorching in there. I did a very light raster. You can kind of see like the little dot matrix lines in there. This took about 1 hour and 20 minutes. And did a nice job on the scoring and the cutting, went right through. We just had this taped together, but it did a nice job on that.
Great.
Yep. Then let's talk about, now we haven't really talked about this feature a lot. It has the camera built in.
Yeah, and like Glowforge also has a camera built in. They allow you to use it so you can trace basically things that you've drawn, trace with the laser.
Yeah.
But their camera system is mounted to the center of the lid, and here the lid is just glass.
It's on the head itself. So it is actually on right here under the head of the laser.
Yes.
That's not the laser itself, but the laser, the focusing lens. So what you can do, as you said, you can do a few different things with this. You can capture like a doodle, and it will actually turn it into a raster and then burn it on your piece. You can also use it to capture photos. You can also use it for positioning. So if you need to get artwork that is in the software onto the piece that's on the bed already, you can scan the bed. It does 9 separate scans and stitches them together.
Oh, that's different because it can move. I imagine those stitches then pretty good fidelity and alignment is pretty good then.
And we'll talk about that. Yeah. So then you can then use that to position it on the image that you captured, which is nice. So I had this guy laying around, and just place this in the center of the bed, and you capture from the software. And I tweaked the raster settings, and we did a little etch of that. Nice. So like not bad. I mean, it took a few minutes. It's pretty good quality. I personally don't use this kind of stuff a lot on the laser cutter for the stuff that I do, but it is nice that it's there, and it turned out pretty well. So I was curious as to how well the camera would actually align artwork onto a piece.
Right.
So basically what I did here is I did a little test. I made a bunch of concentric squares that I just scored, okay? So the orange is, I burned that first. I just burned that on there, the outside, and then I took my concentric ones and I tried to place it inside of that orange one based on the camera. So I captured with the camera, and then I tried to position this by hand using the image. Center turned out pretty darn close. Not bad. If you had to do something super, super, super precise, that's not gonna work. But if you're just trying to get something like pretty well aligned, that's good. Now you'll notice this one.
Yeah, misaligned.
Yeah, so I'm not... If it was in the center of the lid, I could see distortion of the lens causing a problem like that.
Yeah.
But you can see here we're almost 1/4 of an inch off this way with the scan versus the placement. So I'm not sure what's going on there per se. that might be an adjustment or something else going on that I'm not aware of. But it seems like center placement might be your best bet for that type of work.
Right.
I also discovered limitations on the edges like that for raster stuff like this, you can't raster to the very, very edge. So this is a 20 by 12, but the etching area is actually like 18 and a half because it can't etch to the very, very edge. And I think it mainly has to do with like,
deceleration
exactly.
of the gantry unit.
It's a mechanical thing. So it would basically slam into the edge because it doesn't have any room to slow down. Right. So you do lose a little bit on the edges. Top to bottom is okay, but you have to go in about this much to etch. So yeah, so overall, I was really happy with how all of the cuts and everything turned out. I also did, just for kicks, I did some Delrin, which is my new favorite thing, the laser cut. It turned out fantastic. It doesn't have the settings for this in there. I just did a little tweaking based on the acrylic, and after about 5 tries, I got it right. It did a really good job on this as well. And I was very happy with all of the cuts that we got out of it, the engraving, and I felt like the time was, I was expecting much longer times versus what I'm used to, and I felt pretty reasonable.
All right, okay. So final thoughts on this.
So likes and no likes. Likes, it was easy to set up. It did a really good job on all the cuts we did. I like the software for the most part. I like the actual paper manual that has literally everything you need in this, including adjusting and maintenance, which is great. And like the 3D printers, they had a really good FAQ that covers most questions that you come up with. I also liked the on-screen controls, which is a really nice touch, and the fact that you could run things from memory. Yeah. Direct Connect, awesome, was a really nice bonus, and like not having to have a network connection because if you're out in the garage, you may have that problem. And the material database I found was really helpful, and for the most part, if it was the matching material, was spot on, and you can always add to that as needed. No likes. So no likes, we did discover that the honeycomb that sits in here is a little bit wiggly. There's a lot of play in there. And to be fair, most laser cutters, even the big ones, are kind of like that, but they're so big and heavy that once you put them in place, they stay there. So I was having some problem where I had to replicate positioning of things, and that was a little bit of a problem. I'd like to see an adjustment for that, or you can make your own shims to like make it a little tighter. The bottom line is I really liked it. Pricing wise, it may be out of your personal budget because the base unit is $5,999.
$6,000. That includes the water cooler, but not the BOFA filter.
Yeah, and they're gearing it more towards education, which I think this is a good choice in that case. With the upgrade of the booster fan, it's $6,300, and then if you go all out and get the BOFA filter, you're looking at about $8,000. Right, so, but for small run manufacturing or hobby people who are doing a lot of stuff, you have to decide if it is worth your while.
Might be one of those things that you get it with a bunch of people and share a cutter for a small makerspace.
But the advantage of that is it is one of those things that just works out of the box. You don't have to tinker with it. You don't have to upgrade things and stuff like that. So if that is what you're looking for, it may be the good choice for you.
And we always say buy the product for what it is today, not necessarily for what the promises will come. And support, even though Dremel says that they will be improving the software and refining some of that UI and fixing some of those quirks that we had with it. This is a fine laser cutter for what it is today. And of course, you have no fear of them pulling the plug because all you have to worry about is the consumable, which is the lifespan of the tube. And they will be available for personal replacement. I don't have the pricing on that at this point, but All right, so that is the Dremel Digilab laser cutter, a 40-watt hobby laser. It's not the cheapest one out there. It's not the most expensive one out there, but reliable and work great for us. I like it.